Hello and welcome to Capitol Hill. I'm Julie Doyle. The Prime Minister's Economic Forum has wrapped up after a day of discussion mostly behind closed doors. The Prime Minister has urged businesses to talk up the Australian economy, while the Reserve Bank Governor has highlighted productivity growth as the biggest challenge facing the country. Joining me today we have Labor MP Graham Perrott in Brisbane and Liberal MP Alan Tudge in Melbourne. But before we get started today, let's first hear some of the highlights from the Economic Forum.
It's just as important that we all leave here tomorrow determined to speak up for our economy, to speak up for the facts. The bad news from overseas is making more noise at the moment than hailstones on a tin roof. Those of us who know how strong our economy is overall really do have to speak up to be heard. We know it's in the interests of business that confidence grows. We know it's in the interests of working people that confidence grows too. We all need investment to flow. We all need jobs to grow. We all need consumers to spend.
There are big benefits to us as consumers from a high currency, and that is part of the mechanism for spreading the gains of the resource boom. It is very tough for many businesses, but I think the question is one of adaptability.
Graham Perrott, to you firstly. Most of this forum today has been held behind closed doors. Do you think it would have been better for the debate if it was held in the open?
Look, obviously a big supporter of the Fourth Estate and the great work that you do, but sometimes people feel hamstrung, get a bit camera shy, not politicians obviously, but some of those business leaders, they like to be able to speak freely and explore, kick around ideas, and sometimes that's done better behind closed doors, just like in any business endeavour. Sometimes it's a good idea to kick things around rather than actually say that this is what we're committed to.
Now, just looking at what Glenn Stevens had to say, he was the main focus of what we heard this morning. Now, he talked about the high exchange rate not necessarily being all bad, that it does bring benefits for consumers, and that productivity growth is the way to cope. Now, is the government doing enough? What do you think the government could be doing to lift productivity growth?
Well, obviously, productivity's been flatlining for about the last 10 years from memory. I think when we came to office for that quarter, it was at zero, and it hasn't improved significantly. Obviously, we've got a lot of production improvements in the pipeline. The biggest one in terms of productivity is obviously the NBN. That's in terms of the digital revolution and the digital age, the way of coping with where we are in the world, close to Asia, a long way away from Europe and the Americas. The NBN will play a major role there, and that will be a major boost of productivity. Couple that with doubling the investment in education. In the latest budget, the only sort of section that was spared the knife, I guess, was the higher education sector. That shows that we are committed to boosting productivity. You do it by innovation, not lower wages, not by trying to compete with those other parts of the world in terms of wages, doing it in the smart way. Boost training, boost higher learning, boost some of those other things that will make sure that the jobs of the future, which we don't even know what they are, will come to Australia.
Alan Tudge, I'll bring you in now. Do you share those views echoed by Glenn Stevens there that productivity growth is the way for businesses to deal with the high Australian dollar?
Certainly productivity growth is critical for long-term prosperity, and some of the things which I think we need to be working on are things like lowering taxes. We need to be investing in infrastructure. I agree with Graham that we need to be investing in skills and education, because that can be a long-term driver of productivity. And of course we need to be providing a little bit more flexibility in relation to the labour market. So those are some of the key things I think we need to be working on. In relation to tax, of course, the last thing we need at this stage is the world's biggest carbon tax, which will be a drag on productivity.
You just mentioned the flexibility in the labour market. Now, Glenn Stevens talked about the recommendations of the Productivity Commission, that they'd be a good way for the government to go. And they have talked about more flexibility for work arrangements and workforce requirements. Is that a direction then that the Coalition would go in? Would that be your focus?
The Coalition will move the pendulum towards the middle in relation to labour laws. We think the pendulum has gone too far under the Fair Work Act. It has empowered unions and it's disadvantaged businesses. and we think we need to move the pendulum towards the centre again, and that's the type of policy direction that we'll be heading
So
towards.
we've heard that phrase quite a bit, move it back to the centre, but what does that actually mean? What does that mean? What kind of changes will we see?
Well, we'll release our policies in due course, well before the next election, but we are hearing almost every day from businesses that they're being hamstrung by some of the labour laws which are presently in place. And as you pointed out, the Productivity Commission says that this is one of the key things to drive productivity in our nation. And so we need to have some sensible changes. It's not going to be work choices, but just some sensible changes in order to provide a little bit more flexibility for both workers and for employers.
And Graham, Glenn Stevens said today that as these decisions are difficult and not popular when some of the actions to boost productivity, does the government have the will to do this?
Look, Labor definitely has a proud tradition of workforce reform. When I started work, it was, and I'm not that old, it was central wage fixing. You know, blokes in suits, primarily blokes in suits, sat around and worked out what people should get paid. Hawke and Keating brought in these enterprise bargaining, and then the benefits of that have flowed throughout the economy. And the Howard and Costello governments have reaped some of the benefits of that flexibility. Now, that was a trade-off. People took, the Accord was a masterstroke in terms of business, unions, government sitting down together and working out how best to advance the nation. Look, I'm not that. I must be hearing from different employers too, Alan. Maybe that's a case of being a Queenslander with the boom up here. Employers that I'm talking to, particularly employers connected with the mining sector, they're talking about skills and bodies. They're not talking about labour flexibility, whatever. I'm not sure what that is code for. It seems to be a different message for the HR Nichols Society versus the Liberal Party branches versus actually talking to the media. I'm not sure what the policy will actually be. We do know that some people are heavy in the opposition to bring work choices. That's the agenda. That's the way to go at all.
That's the way to go at all. And buried. We won't be going back there. We've said
right.
That categorically.
I think there was a blood oath without oath.
This is an issue that we have well canvassed, so I think it's time to move on to another issue. And you talked about the HR Nichols Society there, and the Health Services Union National Secretary Kathy Jackson spoke at that society last night, and she had some ideas about making unions subject to the same rules as corporations. Let's hear a little of that speech from last night.
Particularly in the light of the HSU controversy, I believe there is a very strong case for extending to the full extent possible and applicable the same governance, investigation and enforcement provisions that apply to other corporations, generally those registered under the Corporations Act, to unions. Now I anticipate a chorus of commentary from my union comrades that I'm simply adopting Tony Abbott's position, to which I say this. First, I advocate an ASIC-type reform process for union regulation before the federal coalition adopted its position. By the way, that's okay, Tony. I don't care where you get your ideas from.
And Graham Perrott, has Kathy Jackson jumped ship here by supporting this idea of Tony Abbott's?
Well, it's the HR Nichols Society and industrial reform has a checkered history in terms of delivering some positive outcomes for the national economy, I would suggest. I'm not sure where Kathy Jackson's coming from there, and if she looked at the legislative agenda of the Gillard government, we are actually looking at some of the checks and balances and some of the penalties that that Bill Shorten has already announced that do reflect some of the responsibilities that ASIC enforce on corporations. So there's no surprises there really in terms of some of the things we're trying to achieve. And the reality is that quite a few Labor members of Parliament that have had connections with the union movement, and you find me someone that would not agree with this fact, that union members' money is sacrosanct and should only be used for the purposes of the Labor Party.
Is that why, though, that we may need tougher controls, though, because of what we've seen with the Health Services Union?
Well, and it seems to have been a bit of a rogue union. I have worked for a union in the past, and I've always seen me as a Labor member of Parliament that the Labor Party is the political wing of the union movement. No problems with that at all. Not, sometimes Alan and his comrades say it's a bit of a problem. I've never seen it as a problem. The reality is the Labor Party was born out of the union movement here in Queensland. Barcaldine, the shearers' strike. The first Labor government in the world was actually here in Queensland in the 1st of December 1899. So no problem with that at all. So the reality is we should have respect for looking after the workers of Australia, be they in the union movement or that majority of Australians that aren't in the union movement that reap the benefits of the endeavours of the union movement and the Labor Party.
Alan,
with those.
Alan, you'd welcome this support for coalition policy, wouldn't you?
Well, of course. I mean, she's just Ms. Jackson is just articulating coalition policy. Really, we put this on the agenda several months ago now, when Tony Abbott launched our policy, which was in essence to treat unions and other registered organisations the same as you treat companies, and so they'll be treated similarly in terms of their regulations and similarly in terms of the penalties which apply. And we see no reason why this can't be done immediately, and the government could introduce these measures immediately, and the only thing that really is stopping that is that the fact that the unions aren't just the masters of Labor members such as Grant, but they install the Prime Ministers and get rid of Labor Prime Ministers, and they pretty much all Labor members and
you're parroting
Labor
your
members.
party lines, not using real analysis.
Well, on that, Graham, though, just on that, Graham.
We know when Paul Howes went on the 7:30 report and
I didn't see Paul Howes having a vote in the caucus room, and I was in that caucus room.
But he was one of the key people.
Every person in that caucus room makes up their own mind.
I'll just come in there. Just on that, though, that's another point that Cathy Jackson raised, that she talked about Bill Short and using unions as part of the factional battles within the ALP.
Yeah, look, I don't know, maybe I sit outside that a little bit, and I don't know Victorian politics as well as Cathy Jackson or Bill Shorten, but I do know this, that there's a proud connection between the Labor Party and the union movement, and nothing that I would ever try and hide or conceal from the voters of Moreton. They know that I'm a proud member of the trade union movement, and happy to be so. I don't see that as a problem. That's what the Labor Party stands for. What does Alan stand for? It seems that they hang up a shingle that says not Labor. Well, you can't stand for being not Labor. You've actually got to stand for something. The Labor Party is one of the proudest institutions in Australia, and I'm happy to be connected with the union movement.
We stand for lower taxes, we stand for less regulation, we stand for greater opportunities for people to achieve their potential. We stand for stronger communities, we stand for a cleaner environment, and we're starting to outline policies
Alan, you've got to talk about what it actually means out there in the workforce.
That's what we're standing for.
But Alan, our tougher rules, though, for unions, is that an attempt, though, to try to restrict their influence?
It's not. What it is an attempt to do is to try to protect the union fees of the lowest paid workers in the country, because what we saw in the Health Services Union was hundreds of thousands of dollars going to things which frankly they should not be going towards, including paying for prostitutes. Now, and there's not enough transparency there, and we just think there should be better protections for union members so that they have surety that their money is being spent in the right places, and there should be greater transparency.
And we'll have to cut it there, I'm afraid, Alan. We're about to run out of time. Graham Perrott and Alan Tudge, thank you both for joining me. And you can join us again at the same time tomorrow for another edition of Capitol Hill.